On November 30th, 2022, Sonic Team announced an official update roadmap in which, throughout the course of the next year, they'd be releasing 3 updates that would add a bunch of brand new content, and to finish it all off, a final story. Update 3 has now been released, and with that the game's lifecycle is completed. Unless they suddenly announce a secret update 4, Frontiers is done, so I think it's time to take a second look. At the end of the original review, I came to the conclusion that while Frontiers is a good game, it is an extremely flawed one. It majorly suffers in every area, from having a lack of staff with having less than 150 people work on the entire game, to also not having enough time to finish, with Sonic Team practically having to beg Sega to delay the game to 2022. To sum up the main issues, the story past Chaos is rushed and unfinished, the gameplay loop is repetitive and eventually gets boring, cyberspace, especially the 2D levels, is very unfun to play, and combat needs far more improvement. But since that video, like I said, we've had 3 large updates, so I decided instead of making a brand new review, I'd take the original review, but update it completely with way more updated thoughts. Some of the things I say will just be copy and pasted from the original script, but that's because I believe some of the stuff I already said is fine as is, and aligns with my thoughts as of 2023. I also want to mention the Final Horizon, aka Update 3, is getting its own section, so while I will talk about it in the soundtrack section, I won't be mentioning it in the story or gameplay sections. Speaking of the soundtrack section, let's start with that. The soundtrack of this game is incredible. I kinda don't know what to say about this OST that hasn't already been said, but I'll try my best. It's got a whole bunch of tracks here that I think anyone would love, no matter which genre of music you're into. The vocal themes especially are genuinely some of the best in the franchise. One Way Dream being a message from Sonic Team about their future is genuinely adorable, and the song itself is really good even without that. Find Your Flame is basically a direct parallel of Infinite's theme from Sonic Forces, and they even got the same guy to sing it. And even the non-vocal themes are pretty good. The Coco Mission music is a really good track, and the fishing music is just great to vibe to. It's also genuinely cool that the music for each island is adaptive. As you progress through the story, the music will get more and more tense, and almost kind of epic in a sense. And if you like a certain movement more than the others, you can always use the jukebox to play it back. Though you will have to get the music note for it first, which is fine as you can get these anytime you want. However, one issue with the jukebox though is that because it's instantly unlocked when you start the game, it means you likely aren't going to be hearing the actual island music that much, unfortunately. I feel like the jukebox should serve as a post-game thing instead of being a thing you get from the start, so that players can actually hear the island music ramp up. I know this is technically gameplay related, but I figured I'd just mention it here since it's also related to the soundtrack. Back to the OST itself though, it makes it even better that they added other tracks in the new updates. For example, with the release of Update 2 and the Action Chain challenges, which I'll get into in the gameplay section, they released the Action Chain music. And this music is actually fire. I like this track a lot. And Update 3 added, I don't know, like maybe 40 or so tracks, nothing much. A lot of them are remixes, but fuck me dude, these remixes are still really good. The original tracks we got are great as well. My favorite track in the entire expanded OST is Blood Flow, which is Knuckles' new theme. Spoilers coming up here, so skip ahead to the gameplay section now, but I also thought them remaking I'm Here, but with Kellen and Quinn, was fucking awesome, because it's more reminiscent of a Titan theme now, and I'm With You having vocals is something I never knew I needed in life. I'd highly recommend checking out the entire OST when you can, it's a great listen. Let's begin simple with the hub worlds. This is absolutely something Sonic Team needs to work on in future games. There are 5 hub worlds in this game: Kronos, Eris, Chaos, Rhea, and Oranos. Of these 5, Kronos, Rhea, and Oranos all feel the same. All 3 are giant, grassy plains with not too much civilization, and it kinda just is really disappointing when we were promised 5 islands but really only got 3. Oranos even has the same badges to collect as Kronos does, that being pink hearts. This leaves Eris and Chaos, which are actually fully original. Chaos is my least favourite of the two though, and my least favourite in general. Without the spin dash, it's insanely frustrating to navigate. Not to mention, Chaos Island has multiple islands, but again, without the spin dash, they have only one proper way to actually get to them. And because of the island being messy and at the same time a little narrow, it just feels really annoying trying to look for the right way to go. However, with the spin dash, this improves a lot, and so, to be honest, while this is still my least favourite island, it's not completely awful. Gonna go off topic to speak more about the spin dash, however. The spin dash in this game was a move added in Update 2 for Sonic's birthday, and is obtained via S ranking every action chain challenge. There are 10 challenges on every island, so you will have a lot to complete. The action chain challenges are fun, and the music slaps, but I hate that the spin dash is the reward for finishing them, when really, it should be a move you get at the start of the game, or a move you unlock at some point in the skill tree, because it basically means in starting a fresh save file, you're going to go the entire game without it, and it's kinda essential to making the open zone more fun to traverse around, especially with Chaos like already stated. Back to the hub worlds though, I also don't think it helps that the skill gap between Chaos and RS just feels way too big. Like, going from RS to Chaos feels like going from Green Hill Zone to Labyrinth Zone. It's instant whiplash, which makes it really noticeable. They also genuinely suffer from the art style of this game not really being all that great. I really don't like how this game looks visually. I get what they were going for, they want these islands to appear mysterious and almost out of place in Sonic's world, to make everything feel unfamiliar, but it's also just not for me. I love when games get insanely artistic with their art style, similar to Hi-Fi Rush or Persona, but this game just goes for an approach that is pretty boring and bland in terms of almost everything. I get this is subjective and all that, but for me, I would much rather prefer they go a more cartoony and artistic route in the next game. The final issue as of right now that I have when it comes to the hub worlds is how the map discovery system is just not that great. When you first go to an island, the map is undiscovered, and so you can't see anything until you discover it. And to discover it, you need to do challenges. Challenges themselves are actually pretty fun, and they usually don't take too much time to complete. The problem is that some can be pretty annoying to find. I wish that they all just appeared on the map from the start instead of making the player look for them. Marvel's Spider-Man 2018 did that, and I found it way easier to complete the map that way. Another issue the map discovery system faces is you sometimes just won't be told how to do anything. How am I expected to notice the piles of sand I have to side loop that blend in with the ground and are spread far out from each other? And god, fuck the ones that require a specific time of day. The day-night cycle is about 20 minutes. If you find it during the day, you have to sit there and wait because you cannot change the time of day at all. Now let's talk about combat. The combat in this game is it's alright, I guess. Okay, to be completely fair, it's not awful, but I think the combat mainly suffers from the fact that it substitutes substance for style. And while yes, all the moves look good, they're from the get-go pretty strong and not at all hard to pull off. There's really just not much depth, which is actually something the Werehog got right. Even if it doesn't have as much style. The supersonic fights suffer from this too, by the way. All of them are insanely easy and present very little challenge. They're mainly just focused on spectacle. The hardest one is probably the end, which doesn't even really count because you won't even fight the end if you don't beat Supreme on hard mode. It's also just a Toho ripoff. If the next game can find a good balance between substance and style, we could have a perfect combat system for Sonic on our hands. I think another issue I have with the combat is the skill tree. A skill tree is a really great idea for Sonic, but in this game it's kinda messy. For example, some of the strongest moves are at the very start of the tree. Phantom Rush and Sonic Boom should not be that early. They should be further down to make things more challenging. And why is auto combo even on here? This should just be an accessibility feature available from the start. Also, I don't really like how most of the stuff on here is just moves. I feel like it should also be general improvements to Sonic himself, such as increasing the distance of Sonic's air boost or increasing the amount of rings you get from a side loop. A skill tree isn't just for new moves, and I feel as if making it only that misses the point of a skill tree just a little. I hope they take inspiration from other games with skill trees and expand on this idea in the next game. Moving on, I want to talk about the boss fights. Oh my fucking god, these boss fights are goddamn awesome. They're easily, at least in my opinion, the best part of the game. The music here really assists the experience too. Even the most simple of boss fights like Giganto feels super cinematic and it's great. I love how they don't just make you be Supersonic at the start of the fight either. You actually have to go get the emerald yourself from the head of each Titan. And that's something a Sonic game has never done before. Usually you just start off as Supersonic, but this game makes everything more interesting by adding that small normal Sonic part at the start of the fight. Again though, these fights prioritize spectacle over difficulty, which leads to these mechanically being really easy. If I were to pick one thing to improve on with these, it'd definitely be the difficulty. Giganto being easy is fine because it's the first proper boss in the entire game, but when Supreme, the final boss, is even easier, then there's a very clear problem. In terms of mini-bosses, they're also really good. Mechanic/gameplay-wise, they're actually far more interesting than the Titans. Some of my favourites are the towers, spiders, and the ninja type of enemies. But I do have one kinda small issue. The cutscene that plays whenever you're in range of a mini-boss is kind of annoying. I wish instead of it being a full-on cutscene, it would just be an indicator at the top of your screen, therefore making it clear you're being attacked, and doesn't straight up halt you from moving whenever you get in range of one. The gameplay loop of this game is honestly just kind of okay. It's not awful, but it could be better. The gameplay loop is basically just go to island to get memory tokens, talk to character, get Vault Keys, and then get Chaos Emerald, and repeat. I'm not a massive fan of this, to be honest. Grinding Vault Keys and tokens can be really tedious and gets pretty boring after a good while. By the 5th island, you'll 100% be ready to give up and feel really tired. Occasionally, there will be little mini-games you can play, which for the most part involve the Coco. These are sometimes fun. I say sometimes because if I ever have to hear the name Coco Roundup again, I might just end it all. But like I was saying, again, the gameplay loop is just okay and not that interesting. I wish it would be spiced up a little. For example, they could add side quests via Coco or even the main gang that could give us a certain amount of memory tokens for completing. Memory token puzzles also suffer from another big issue this game has: 2D sections. The 2D sections in this game are just hell. I'll get into the cyberspace side of things in a bit, but focusing on only the hub worlds, these suck. It's not even that they're really easy, it's really just the fact that trying to traverse around the 3D open world and then getting locked into a 2D section is not fun in the slightest and really ruins the pacing in certain areas. This is 100% where they started to worry about budget, because there is no excuse for us to have this many damn 2D puzzles. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention the part where you can completely break this so-called gameplay loop with our Lord and Savior, Big the Cat. Yes, you heard me right, Big is back in this game with his own unique cyberspace portals, which, if you enter, you can fish and get tokens. These can buy you stuff like Eggman memos, which I really recommend getting, especially if you're super into the lore. It can also buy you Vault Keys, memory tokens, and even Seeds of Power and Defense. And this is where it gets broken, because the further you are into this game, the more coins it takes to play Big's fishing minigame. But also, the things you catch get an increase in tokens upon being traded in, meaning you can go on a spending spree quickly. Utilizing this to the fullest means you can get all the Vault Keys you need at the very start of the island. And if you're worried about running out of coins, you just need to wait for a Starfall event, which gives a fuck ton of coins. And if you thought it couldn't get worse, well, you're wrong. As part of a collaboration with Monster Hunter, they added a cooking minigame to Big's fishing spot. So upon doing well in that, you get a ton of coins that you can use to buy stuff. This DLC is entirely for free, and you don't need purple coins to play the minigame, so you can just do this forever. TLDR, Big the Cat is fucking overpowered in this game, and I highly recommend his cyberspace portal is looked for as soon as you reach an island. Speaking of the Starfall event, however, I despise this mechanic so much. On paper, this is a great idea, but they really fumbled when executing it. You can't see anything. It takes up so much of the screen, and to make everything worse, I hope you aren't trying to get to a checkpoint you set, because guess what? The checkpoints blend in with the Starfall pieces. Surprisingly enough, I do hope they bring this idea back. I just want it to be massively reworked. Maybe have it be like a minigame thing, like Tiger Tiger from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, that you can visit during the nighttime and make it 20 to 40 rings to play. Something like that would work way better than the mess of a gameplay segment the Starfall event is. They were on serious crack when coming up with that. I genuinely don't know what Sonic Team was thinking. The good thing though is that you can turn it off in settings, and the only thing that will happen is that enemies will respawn. Another thing I have to talk about in this segment is cyberspace. I'm a bit disappointed, honestly. I don't care too much because it's almost entirely optional, but it still needs some improvement. The cyberspace level themes are basically the same throughout the entire game, and the one kind of new theme they do have is used barely throughout the game, only getting more than 2 levels during the final island. Most of the cyberspace levels are either Green Hill or Chemical Plant, and you'll be lucky if you're able to find the semi-new theme. This is pretty disappointing in all honesty, because I was hoping for some old themes to return. They use a lot of old level layouts from levels we haven't seen in years in the game as well, which makes it worse. Like, the layouts are good, but I'd prefer the actual levels themselves return to spice things up. Hopefully if they do this again, it's used in a more creative way. I also think the level challenges you need to complete to get Vault Keys could be a bit more creative, but it's a minor issue. I will say though, in the 3D cyberspace stages, the Spin Dash improves everything a lot. It makes everything so much more fun. Honestly, the 3D cyberspace stages are pretty fun in general. 1-2 has genuinely become my joint favourite along with 3-3 and 2-4, because they're all incredibly enjoyable to S-rank and play. The 2D cyberspace stages on the other hand, I'm sorry, I just can't find myself enjoying the 2D ones at all. I genuinely can't, they're just so clunky and unfun to play in this game. In Frontiers, Sonic's physics were clearly meant for 3D and 3D only, and it's made so obvious with basically any 2D section in this game. Now, obviously these 2D levels are likely due to time constraints, but that doesn't change the fact that they're still there. The final thing I need to talk about is the Cocos. I love both the Elder Coco and the Hermit Coco now, to be honest. I originally hated the Elder Coco because someone at Sonic Team wanted to ruin everyone's day by making him level you up one by one, but the Elder had a redemption arc in Update 1. I will say Hermit is still better, but Elder Coco, you've been forgiven. However, funnily enough, you can get every upgrade from the Elder and Hermit really quickly because of, once again, Big the Goddamn Cat, where you can just buy a fuck ton of Cocos and Seeds of Power and Defense. They also added the Royal Family of Cocos in Update 2, and I really enjoyed collecting these. For trading these in at your local Coco store, you get extra boost gauges, which is cool. The platforming challenges were mostly really good times, and I wouldn't mind them coming back in future games. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover with this section though, so let's head on and talk about the story a little bit. I want to once again preface that I am not talking about Final Horizon in this section, but instead I'm saving that for after, so this section will only be about the story received upon launch.
Coming up, Starfall Islands. How exciting!
You tracked the Chaos Emeralds here, right? Let's find out what drew them here.
For the first time in many years, I can confidently say that this story is good. This is what it looks like when the team finally cares and aren't getting confused on what species the main villain is supposed to be. The characters are finally talking like real people again, they have feelings and actually care for the people around them. No more shitty jokes that ruin the pacing. Amy actually feels like a character now instead of just being obsessed over Sonic, and thanks to Sonic Movie 2 and Frontiers, Knuckles is mostly back to how he used to be now, which is great. He is not a complete dumbass, and is instead a good fighter and rival for Sonic. One argument that could be made against this story is the fact that one of its main focuses is on references and callbacks to previous games. But I think that's actually a strong point of the story. For years, the games have been nearly entirely disconnected. Forces tried to connect them by bringing back Chaos, Metal, Zavok, etc. But, well, we all know how that went. Now we're getting references as far back as Tails' story in Sonic Adventure 1. They even canonized Styx, one of the best parts of the Boom franchise for me. They also canonized an IDW character, that being Tangle. Both characters that we had no idea were canon. And they're not ignoring the bad stories either. Sonic brings up how Tails saved him from the Deadly Six, Tails even says how he's widely inconsistent, which I much prefer over them just retconning multiple years worth of games. They're instead using it to push him forward and start a journey for Tails, which eventually leads him into growing up and doing his own things. An argument I can make about this story though is that I feel like this story just in general has the issue that if you aren't a Sonic fan, you aren't going to enjoy this story. It's still a good story, but it just isn't going to do it for you if you weren't into Sonic before playing Frontiers. You probably aren't going to care about Tails growing up, or Knuckles learning to leave behind Angel Island to find out what's out there, because to understand what this game is talking about, you kinda need to have prior knowledge of what's been going on for the past decade of Sonic games. One character you might be interested in though is Sage. Her story is really quite emotional, and from the start you can kinda tell she's not a villain. She just wants to protect Eggman, who she sees as her father. She also wants to feel the love that Sonic and his friends have for each other, even if there's parts where it could be done better. I still think Sage was really good and insanely well written. It proves we can get cool new original characters when we have writers who know what they're doing on board. This story does really well at portraying each and every one of these characters in a new light, and gives the new character an actual story. This story feels like Sonic Team cares again. However, it's not all perfect, which means, yeah, it's time to talk about the main ending. So, the ending of this game is insanely underwhelming, and I think it's clear Sonic Team was coming up on the deadline. Sonic's cyber corruption, which is built up throughout the entire game, is just cured with the power of friendship. When Sonic and Sage, who is piloting Supreme, go to space to fight the End, Sonic says how the End took the Ancients' lives, and if they're seriously gonna let it do it all over again. Except, he's speaking to Sage, who is not the Ancients, so why the fuck is he saying this? Unless Sonic just for some reason didn't know Sage was piloting Supreme, which is dumb as shit. I've already spoken about Supreme and the End as a whole in the gameplay section. Even if they were fun, they're just really bad final bosses. The End especially is insanely underwhelming, so it's a good thing we have this little thing called Update 3, aka the Final Horizon, which gives Sonic Team a second chance at making the proper ending they always wanted. So, how is the Final Horizon? I'ma just get out of the way and tell you I didn't like it. It's not bad, and keep in mind, I give Sonic Team massive respect for doing this, especially since this was a free update. But man, I just couldn't bring myself to enjoy it. Also, this is a full spoiler warning, so if you haven't played the update and care for spoilers, please skip this section. I'll at least start off with a few positives. The writing is, of course, still pretty good. I really like how they introduced the lore behind some of the choices they made, and it made for some fairly humorous moments, such as it being revealed that Sonic and his friends are actually just high as shit and are hallucinating the grind rails and all the floating platforms. I love the new cyber form they gave Sonic as well. It 1000% makes up for them just reusing Super Sonic in the base game. The writing for Sonic, Amy, Tails, and Knuckles is of course on point, and I don't really have much I can add for them. I also think the level design for the towers was really good. Yeah, some towers can be difficult, but if you're struggling with it, then please don't be afraid to switch it to easy, as they changed the platforming segments to make it insanely easy for easy mode players. The cyberspace stages are also genuinely some of the best in the series, by the way. They're insanely unique and they have a lot of creative ideas. They also fix an issue I had with regular cyberspace, where the extra requirements which give you vault keys are actually creative and not basic shit like get S rank. So, thank you, Sonic Team. Let's talk about playable characters. Starting with Amy, I really like how she plays. She's fairly similar to Sonic, but it's different enough to where I don't really care. Although, I do understand the complaint about her tarot cards, and I will say, I think it's just because Sega didn't bring her tarot cards back all that well. We went decades with them basically being a forgotten trait that only fans of the franchise would know about, and then essentially in an instant they're a main part of her character now, replacing her hammer. It just feels a little out of place and a little forced. However, that's the only complaint I have for Amy, and that's 100% a writing thing. Aside from that, out of the 3 new playable characters in the DLC, she's probably the best one. Tails is alright, his Cyclone is busted, and really that's all he's good for, as I basically cheesed every platforming section with the Cyclone. He's not really that great when it comes to combat, and why the fuck doesn't he have a homing attack? I'm sure they could have made space for it, so where is it? But at least Tails has a redeeming quality compared to whatever the fuck they were cooking with Knuckles. Knuckles has to be the worst playable character in the game, which deeply upsets me because he's my favorite out of the entire gang. His gliding is probably the biggest criminal offense. It has a startup animation now, and it is insanely slow to a point where you might as well just spend skill points getting the spin dash instead. I don't even know why there's a startup animation. It's so useless, and it makes him so much less fun to play as. Not to mention, the gliding in general is awful to control, and while he's somewhat good for combat, I just don't think it's worth wasting time leveling him up and unlocking his skills to make him good, when you could just play as Sonic, who is way more fun. Knuckles just isn't good to play as. Something all three of the new playable characters suffer from, however, is the weird choice from Sonic Team to make it so, first of all, every single one of them is level 1, which normally is fine, but they start off with no attacks. The only thing they have is a homing attack, which is not going to help with the batshit insane mini-bosses, and there are no regular enemies on this map. Difficulty is something this entire DLC suffers from, but this is just a stupid decision. At least start them off as level 25 and give them more than a basic ass homing attack. Also, why is the skill tree so full with the most basic things? Like jump and double jump. I'm not even kidding, that is a literal skill that is pre-unlocked on the skill tree. There's also stuff that you do have to unlock, like the Psyloop and the ability to just attack. Sonic Team, you did not need to add these. We know you were rushed to meet a deadline. No one would have cared if the skill tree wasn't expanded a ton, especially since this is a free update. Final character related thing I'm going to mention, but I also believe it should be considered a cardinal sin, that for some reason you can't play as Amy, Tails, or Knuckles in the base game. At least make them a reward for 100%ing Final Horizon. It just feels weird having them be locked to Oranos. I also don't like how there's no option for the glitchy effect. Obviously there's a lore reason, but I wish we could disable it if we wanted to. I did mention that difficulty was something this update suffered with, and yeah, I'm going to expand on that. I'm sorry if this sounds harsh, but I'm genuinely convinced they did not playtest this. The trials are so random in terms of difficulty and make no sense. You start off pretty easy, take out these 5 Orano soldiers within 3 minutes, and your stats are all level 1. Might seem tough at first, but if you're at least even somewhat experienced with Frontiers' combat system, you shouldn't have too much of a problem with this. Then you move on to the Snake Trial, which is the biggest piece of bullshit I've ever seen. So it seems fairly similar to the first one. Take out these shell enemies within 2 minutes. This was tough as shit, and if I wasn't told what to do, I don't think I would have even bothered to beat the DLC, because it is genuinely impossible to beat this trial the way the game tells you to do it. The game says that you can only use the Psyloop, but this isn't true at all, and you should honestly just not use the Psyloop actually. What you actually have to do is bait the blades out at max distance, then start attacking, and when you see the blades coming back, parry them until you eventually beat the enemy. Then repeat that process again for the other 3 enemies. Even knowing what to do, I still had trouble with this because the camera was being such a bitch and it would zoom in and out. For example, the first enemy I went to take out, it zoomed out like normal and I could see the blade. The second enemy, it stayed focused on Sonic the entire time, and so I couldn't see anything and had to be insanely careful of when the blade was going to come back, leaving little time for me to actually, attack the enemy. And then you have the third and fourth trials, which you'd think are even more difficult, but no. They're actually insanely easy. The third is just the wolves which circle you and you have to parry, and the fourth is just a fight against Ninja, which for some reason lasts 10 minutes, even though in reality it takes 30 seconds. And to top everything off, just when you think they're being consistent and the Snake Trial was probably just a small hiccup, they hit you with the hardest trial in the entire game, King Coco's Trial. Oh boy, do I have some goddamn words. Who did we piss off at Sonic Team? Like, we must have done something truly heartbreaking for them to create such an awful challenge. Like, this is not only just hard, this is literally unfair. Trial 5 consists of essentially boss rushing Giganto, Wyvern, and Knight, the first 3 titans of the main game. And on paper, this seems really easy until you realize something. First of all, level 1 stats, and second of all, you are on a 400 ring time limit, of which you cannot gain any rings back, even Psyloop doesn't give you rings. And finally, the parry has been nerfed into the ground. How long you can parry for depends on what mode you choose. Easy is, I believe, 4 seconds, normal is around 2 to 3 seconds, and hard is like a split second. So yeah, you are very much nerfed, and even on easy, this takes absolutely forever. Knowing when to parry can be insanely annoying, especially when this is one of 2 parts in the entire DLC that actually teaches you this, and the other part is the final boss. And getting hit even once while as regular Sonic can basically kill your entire run, because it takes like 80 rings and you only get 20 back when they fall on the ground. You need to essentially have a perfect run, and I genuinely don't think any casual player or anyone unfamiliar with Sonic is going to be able to beat this. I spent like 3 hours on this even just doing it on easy. So here's some tips that I learned from experience. First of all, Quick Psyloop, Stomp, and Cross Slash are your MVPs. Use them as much as possible. Stomp and Cross Slash already do a lot of damage, but when you add Quick Psyloop into the mix, they wipe the health of all 3 titans. Second of all, Knight is a big run killer. At the start of the fight before Sonic goes super, you'll want to go directly under him to avoid him running you over and losing all of your rings. Another thing about Knight is that his spikes don't make you lose rings instantly. If you get hit by his spikes, air boost out and keep going towards his hand. The final thing is to be ready to parry at any moment, especially in the second phase of all 3 titans when you quick Psyloop them. They do not like that, and they will try to break out of it, so you will need to be prepared to parry. But yeah, that's pretty much all the advice I can give for now. Just try your best and try to keep your mental stability intact, because I definitely couldn't. But now I think it's time to talk about the final boss, and I'm going to say something that no one is going to like. I hated this final boss. Writing and storytelling wise, it was hype as fuck, but there's so many issues with this boss that just overall destroyed my enjoyment of this. It's so incredibly janky to fight, and the game just tells you fucking nothing on how to beat this. Actually, sorry, it does tell you how to beat it, if you happen to beat some mini-bosses on the map and speak to King Coco. And the worst part is these are essential to beating the boss. What the fuck were you thinking, Sonic Team? Why is stuff that is pretty much needed to beat the boss locked behind optional mini-bosses that you are practically forced to avoid for most of the DLC until you become Sonic again? I know this is an opinion a lot of people are going to disagree with, and that's perfectly fine. If you enjoyed this fight, then I can't say you're wrong for doing so. It's your opinion, and keep in mind the ending is still really good. I love the reference to SA2 they included with Sonic in Space, and how Eggman got a happy ending with Sage getting to live. And Cybersonic is fucking awesome. There's absolutely zero debate from me that Final Horizon is the definitive ending. But man, after going through so much suffering with King Coco to end with a fight that is janky as fuck and extremely frustrating, it just was not worth it for me. But let's end this off on a positive note. In celebration of Frontiers coming to a close, I wanted to do something special. And so I got some of my friends, both those who do or plan to do YouTube soon, and those who don't at all, to record some stuff and give their thoughts on Update 3. So let's listen to what they have to say, and then we can close this video off with a conclusion.
Sonic Frontiers Update 3 is kinda good at best and unnecessarily difficult at worst. While there are some amazing aspects to this update, such as the story actually being good compared to the base game, the ending of the DLC being outstanding, and obviously the music's being a banger, we really can't skip over the fact that most of this update kinda feels unfinished. Especially with the new playable characters being weird to control at some points, their skill trees being laughably bare bones, and the ungodly difficulty spike that they have compared to the base game, such as the Guardians, the tower climbing, and the trials. Seriously, why are the trials so hard? Especially the Snake Trial. Whoever designed that Snake Trial can go fucking kill themselves!
Sonic Frontiers Update 3 is certainly an update, you can't deny that. Jokes aside, I really enjoyed it, but yeah, it has a lot of jank. Like the weird startup lag every character has on like everything. other than Sonic, and the godforsaken 5th trial. Someone really pissed off Kishimoto, like really. But overall, I really enjoyed the story and the new platforming challenges. And despite the startup lag on everyone, the characters were really fun to play. My only real complaint is that it's kinda unpolished, like the rest of the game, but there's a lot of fun to be had if you're willing to put up with the jank. Like the new cyberspace stages, they are genuinely really good. And they, mostly, feel like they were actually designed with Frontiers as Sonic's moveset in mind. I hope we can see more of that type of level design in the next mainline game. Anyway, bye!
I think the cyberspace stages in the Final Horizon are honestly insanely high quality. It's really cool how they remixed the stages to have a ton of multiple pathways, and the music is also great. They also added multiple things to do in the levels, such as collecting the number rings or saving animals. Finally, to top it all off, they made the stages a lot more challenging too, which results in them being more fun. Overall, I really enjoyed the new cyberspace stages, and they're incredibly well designed.
My thoughts on Sonic Frontiers The Final Horizon are that the update is amazing. Like, the story was fixed, like, the ending was so cool, the final boss was peak fiction, and the new characters they are fun, but they are heavily followed, and I hope that they get fixed in the next game also. And I think that the highlight that stayed the most consistent about this new update is the new cyberspace stages. They are so fun, and while they are difficult, Sonic Team are experimenting with the cyberspace levels for the next 3D mainline Sonic game stages, and I'm happy about this third update.
Sonic Frontiers The Final Horizon is a great update. Although it has its flaws, I do still think there is potential for an even greater Sonic game. Because of this, I think Sonic Frontiers The Final Horizon lays the groundwork for what could be in Sonic Adventure 3, or maybe even something better. Although the characters do feel great, there is still tons of issues that don't necessarily undermine the great, but start to pile up once you start realizing the issues at hand. I love the Final Horizons. It's something I think could be improved on, and everything about it should be taken into account when making the next Sonic game, so nothing falls flat on its head.
Sonic Frontiers means a lot to me. It's the first game I ever covered on this channel. Yeah, there's been a lot of ups and downs, from me being negative about the game to hopeful, but I feel like that's fair considering how bad Frontiers' marketing started out. Frontiers is also the first game that was released after I'd become a Sonic fan, and it's the first game I ever pre-ordered. So believe me when I say, I have every reason to be biased towards this game. But I figured I'd leave bias out and be completely honest. All in all, this game is good. It's not perfect, it's very far from one of the best Sonic games in my opinion, but that's what makes it so good. This game was never meant to be perfect, it was never meant to be the Sonic game to top all Sonic games, and it didn't need to be. All it needed to do was put Sonic back on the map, and show Sonic Team was capable of delivering a heartfelt story that pushes the characters forward. And they didn't just deliver, they fucking served that shit like a 5-star full-course meal. Yes, the ending was rushed, but that was not in their power. Like I said at the very beginning of the video, Sonic Team had to fight to get the game pushed to just 2022. There was no way in hell they were getting it into 2023. But even better is, the moment they got a second chance, they didn't waste it at all. Again, I didn't like the Final Horizon, but the writing of it is still top-notch, and no matter what, it truly is the best ending for the game. And if Sonic Team was allowed time to fix up some stuff with Final Horizon, such as the issues with the final boss, or the difficulty being all over the place, I would 100% like the DLC way more. Even outside of the story, Frontiers just excels with its gameplay. Again, there's a lot of issues to work out, but the gameplay is still really fun as is, and the issues just make me more hopeful that with an expanded budget and a larger team, Sonic Team could do some crazy shit with the next game. And what's great is we're almost there. We have a great director, a good writer, and a passionate team of developers. All we need is for the higher-ups at Sega to just start caring and realizing the incredible talent they have at their hands. I'll reiterate, Sonic Frontiers isn't perfect, but it's good. It's really good. And it's to a point where this game didn't just make me happy, it made me hopeful. Hopeful that even with everything going on right now, that Sonic will thrive over the next few years. And it has assured me that Sonic has truly begun to find his flame. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
You did well, Sage. It's time to head home, dear daughter.
Home. I like the sound of that.